Joining me for all the chat is the commentator Sam Armstrong. A very, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Always so good to see you. Now, I must point, actually, I was incorrect there just in terms of Gregg Wallace, is that it's the production company Banjay UK that produces MasterChef. They shared a summary of this report on their website. This has been carried out by the independent law firm Lewis Silkin over 7 months. But the programme, of course, is shown on the BBC. It's seen as a BBC show, isn't it? So it wasn't an internal BBC thing. But just your reaction to that, because this comes as the chief of Ofcom has been saying that actually the BBC is losing the public's trust. There's issues about anti-Semitism, about their inaccurate reports on Gaza, star after star after star being able to get away for years with inappropriate, sometimes sexually very predatory behaviour, and nothing is done until it goes into the newspapers. Nearly always it's the Sun that goes, by the way, with Hugh Edwards, renowned in the BBC for being predatory towards younger male members of staff, but do host the election nights and the Queen's funeral and the King's coronation. You're absolutely fine. Gregg Wallace, call blimey governor, the jogging cheeky greengrocer, but he said that all the serious allegations against him, he said last week, had not been upheld. Certainly one of inappropriate, unwelcome physical contact has been upheld. 45 of the 83 allegations. It's bad for Gregg Wallace, he's been sacked, but how bad is this for the BBC?
Well, look, I think it's very serious because so many of these allegations took place over such a long time, and one of the things that this investigation upheld is that there had been almost a dozen complaints over the years about Gregg Wallace, and because of the way he'd kind of been working on different programmes, every single time a complaint was made, it was treated as if it was the first time. And that points to a serious, endemic, just basic management flaws at the BBC.
But he was spoken to. Apparently in 2019 he was given a "you can't behave like this" sort of conversation, and he apparently carried on and nothing was then done.
Well, to be fair, 94% of the allegations all refer to a period prior to 2018, so it does seem like there was a stop, but for years and years, and this happens in every media organisation, he was seen as, quote-unquote, the talent, untouchable, and nothing seemed to be able to be done about him, whereas a junior producer would have been treated very, very differently. And time and again, it's not ITV, it's not Channel 4, it's not Channel 5, it's not Sky or Netflix or Amazon, it is the BBC where these problems are happening worse than anywhere.
Do we just focus more on that, because we've seen the issues with Philip Schofield and at ITV, and lots of other issues, there's allegations of bullying going on. Mind you, BBC Breakfast, big allegations of bullying there on the BBC Breakfast team. Again, we're not privy to what has actually happened. But again, it all plays into this sort of issue of BBC and trust. And of course, one of the things we've got there is also this report that's coming out today in terms of this Gaza documentary, where utterly bizarrely, a documentary about life for children in Gaza seemed to be let's find an ordinary kid in Gaza. Oh, well, they did find an ordinary kid. That ordinary kid was the son of a Hamas minister. Now, it was an independent production company that did it, another production company. But we know that this documentary was viewed by two of the most senior figures in BBC news gathering. They saw it beforehand. Now, if I saw that documentary before it was broadcast, and I did see it, after it was broadcast, my first questions would be, so who's the kid? How do you find the kid? Right, and so someone in that production company either didn't bother, or someone didn't do the research on who this child was, who his parents were, which is surely one of the first things you would check, because surely you can't just talk to a child and pay a child and employ a child without knowing who the parents are. I don't know, unless there are lots of agents working in Gaza in this godforsaken genocide, starving a piece of land. But at that point, did the people above them ask who this kid was? Who verified? Did people ask? Were people lied to? Were the two senior figures at the BBC, Deborah Turnus, the chief executive BBC News and Current Affairs, Joe Carr, the BBC's head of Current Affairs, these two women were the first to view this documentary before it was broadcast. Did they ask? Did they show due diligence? Were they lied to? Because someone's head has to roll. I don't know if it goes all the way to the top or it's just at the very low with someone lied to, but this is absolutely unacceptable.
And it's particularly serious because of this. You're always going to make mistakes in broadcasting. Any walk of life, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to get things wrong from time to time. Here's the thing, though, with the BBC. If you're making mistakes from a fair, unbalanced, unbiased perspective, half the time you're going to be too pro-Israel, half the time you're going to be too pro-Gaza.
That's what they claim. That's what they claim.
But time and again, the mistakes in this case always go one way. What is it that means the BBC, every single time, makes mistakes, has to apologise for offending Israelis, for breaching neutrality on this issue, and for broadcasting anti-Semitism? Why is it that this corporation seems institutionally incapable of reporting news about Jews and Israel fairly?
Yeah, it's as simple as that, isn't it? And it's quite interesting, just tying in on this, a report commissioned by the Board of Deputies of British Jews, which is carried out by Lord Mann, the government's anti-Semitism advisor, and Dame Penny Mordaunt, the former Defence Secretary, of course, a former Labour MP, a current Tory MP, basically into, I mean, neither of them Jewish, just like independent, just like looking at it from a partisan view. And they said they believe that anti-Semitism has been normalised in middle-class Britain, particularly in the professions, in cultural life, in public services, the NHS, in schools and arts and things, universities. And I'm like, well, yeah, in the public sector, on the left, where people on the left largely find a happier place to work, it has now been completely normalised. I meet people all the time who think that they are not racist people, who think they're the good, nice people, who express the most outrageously, blatantly, openly anti-Semitic things and don't even think they're doing it.
And speak to anybody in these industries, both in the public sector but also in creative spaces, a whole raft of industries, who happens to hold the other view, and they will tell you every day they have to go into work, keep their head down, stay stum, because if they open their mouth, if they dare to put another view forward in the civil service, in the public sector, they will be shut out, they will be shut down, they will be kicked out in some cases. And that is really what is most insidious, which is these people are going in and they are forcing their view upon not just their colleagues, but in part with the BBC, with the civil service, all of us, and anybody that disagrees is, as far as they're concerned, persona non grata.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is. Now, I wasn't planning to lead on this item, obviously, just with that report into Gregg Wallace, a major BBC star. I never saw the appeal. I'm happy to watch a baking show or a cooking show. I'd rather just watch a fun one like Bake Off rather than MasterChef. I've always found Gregg Wallace and John Trode intensely unwatchable, personally. And I think, personally, I think, what I believe is institutionalised anti-Semitism, the BBC would be a far more serious issue than the Gregg Wallace issue, which does seem to at least now have been resolved at long last. But we have got an institutional problem in this country with every major institution, public and private, but particularly public is more of concern because we pay for them and they have a duty of care where they just simply cover up any wrongdoing and can protect the institution and the senior people rather than worrying about what's right and what's wrong. And I think that tells us something. So much more to talk about. Let's talk about, again, I'd love your thoughts and your calls on any topic we're talking about, as always. And I'll read the number in just a moment. But a lot of the focus this week is going to be on tax. It's going to be on the economy. Last week was all about migrants. Again, very linked. When you're spending billions every year dealing with an illegal migrant issue, and of course you've been importing, 10 million people in the last 10 years or so, or 20 years into the country, and you haven't seen any improvement in your productivity, your output, or your GDP. Maybe there's a possibility that that's part of the issue as well. But middle-class workers are going to face higher taxes later this year. That is what the Transport Secretary, Hadi Alexandra, has said. She said the government had promised not to increase taxes for people on modest incomes, she said. Well, actually, they said people who are working people. And whenever they're asked, well, what do you mean by working people? And Darren Jones, the Chief Secretary of the Treasury, has been asked again today, but what do you mean by that? People who get, a paycheck at the end of, at the end of the month. Well, that's still most people. Even people I know who are on millions of pounds still get a paycheck at the end of the month. They just don't have to worry about it because they're paid so much. But basically, there was a £22 billion black hole, we're told, that was suddenly discovered by Labour last year. Now there's probably a 40+ billion black hole. They've U-turns on various policies. That money's already been spent. So the money, winter fuel, benefit cuts, they weren't going to save that much, but that money's already been spent. They're going to have to make it up. The economy's not growing. You name it, everything's going wrong. Inflation going up, pay rises for doctors and train drivers and everyone else. But when they talk about middle-class workers face a tax raid, the reality is most people, and a large swathe of people who don't think that they are well off, who are struggling to pay the mortgage or the rent, who are saving for a holiday rather than going, yeah, let's just go skiing again, or anything, that these people are going to find themselves being treated as higher earners who are going to end up paying those taxes, aren't they?
Let me make a prediction now. Rachel from Accounts is going to destroy the British economy. Over the weekend, I was speaking to a businessman that's built a sort of 40-50 million quid business in this country, based himself in this country, always been here, never even considered leaving this country. Yep. He is now actively looking at Malta, at Portugal, at Italy, or, you know, frankly, a Caribbean island, and there are thousands like him.
Does he have a spare room?
16,500 millionaires have left this country in the last year. Every single one of them goes, and when they do so, hundreds of thousands of pounds a year that they pay in taxes goes with them.
Don't the average millionaire pay the taxes of for sort of 300 people or
something?
The
top 1% of people, earners in this country, pay 30% of the taxes. Every single one of them that goes not only takes those taxes with them, but every penny that they were spending in the British economy, and they are now spending it in a foreign economy. Taxes in this country have never, never, never been higher. This isn't hyperbole. This isn't ridiculousness.
But we are still a lower tax economy from the average compared to most European countries, actually, Western European countries.
What? And you only have to look at what basket cases their economies have been.
This is true.
And we have enjoyed, comparatively, a better standard of life. And what are we replacing it with? We are replacing it with, basically, a European-like system.
But without the public services to match.
But if the British public wish to be like, and I don't believe they do, be like Greece, they would have voted for it a very long time ago. We have seen how this record ends before. This government is so paralysed out of fear at the extreme left-wing MPs that they inadvertently, accidentally got elected into Parliament, that they are unprepared to take any basic step to cut public spending. They are shoveling money out of the door as fast as they possibly can. Welfare, whack it up. Migrants, come on in. We've got a 4-star hotel waiting for you. Net zero. Fill your coffers. Green so-called entrepreneurs like Dale Vince, the Labour donor that's done very, very well out of this government.
How coincidentally.
Already. And we cannot just keep putting taxes up. The tax threshold in this country has never, ever been higher.
And I do think the tax, and again, this thing, fiscal drag, this concept that, you know, people's going, oh, great, I've got a pay rise. Brilliant, my pay's gone up. Well, since 2020, inflation has gone up by 25%. So you're 3%, 5%, 7%, 11%. It doesn't then go down. It carries on going. Inflation has gone up. I say everything you're buying, and some things like food, much more expensive. Rents, mortgages, much more expensive. But on average, things have gone up by a quarter. So even if your wages have gone up by a quarter, you think, oh great, well I'm just as well off. Except of course, if you're dragged into the next tax threshold, and then lots of that extra pay, the pay rise, you're now being taxed more. And this is the thing: 50,000, just over 50 grand, you start paying 40% tax. Okay, but at 40 grand, that's the median. So roughly it's not quite the same as the average, but roughly the average earnings of a full-time worker in this country is 40 grand. Okay, in London it is 50 grand. So you're already paying 40% tax if you're an average full-time worker now in London, and a good swathe of people who are average full-time workers outside London are also on the top bit of their income when they get that pay rise and go, oh good, great, I've had the pay rise to cover all those extra costs I've got from the energy bills and the food bill and the cost of buying the car or everything else. But that's all. But 40% of that is going straight to the tax man. So you're not getting that full pay rise. Now, this is a big issue because we're talking about tax rates, 40 and 45%, which was supposed to be for the very rich. Yep. The very rich. And you pay 45% on over 125k. You could argue, those people are very well off. But then, but the idea that someone on 50k, we're talking about police officers, health workers, teachers, who are paying the higher rates of tax. I don't think that's what most of those people who are struggling to pay their bills and make ends meet are not sitting there going, yeah, I'm a higher rate taxpayer, I am so well off. They are not well off.
And remember, there's national insurance to pay on top of that. And look, politicians think they're very, very clever by not raising the rates, by just doing it on the threshold. But we have noticed, Julia, we have noticed across this country, there are millions of people that can remember a time 10 years ago when they could go afford. They've done the right thing. They work hard. Dad's a police sergeant. Mum works in IT. Something like that. People who've made all the right choices, and they can remember 10 years ago they had a BMW on the drive. You know, they'd worked hard. It was on finance. They got to go to a couple of weeks in Spain in the summer and maybe a week at Centre Parks in the spring.
Love a Centre Parks trip.
That was a life that lots of people had, and they have seen it evaporate to the stage where they're going on holiday to Cornwall this summer. Still a lovely place to go, but they couldn't quite justify a foreign flight. And that BMW's been replaced with a Nissan or something else, something they don't want just as much.
But the key thing is hard-working, aspirational people who've done well are now struggling, which they didn't have to do.
They can feel that they have felt themselves.
They're not stupid.
Get just a little bit poor over the last 10 years. So when they see migrants washing up on our shores and all of a sudden got their hand out, it does rankle. It is frustrating because they had something. It has been robbed from them and they want to know who it's been given to.
Absolutely, absolutely.